In a forgotten time,
like pre-1988,
musicians roam the earth freely, playing real guitars, drums, keyboards, and saxophones in their native habitat.
Then, without warning, these hard-working troubadours and minstrels were brought to near extinction by what is now known as the digital age.
Suddenly, drum machines, auto-tune, Pro Tools, and pre-recorded tracks dominated the musical landscape, ravaging both the live performance and recording scene.
A select few musical dinosaurs withstood this onslaught and have persevered, hoping to pass along the wisdom of the ages.
When Musicians Roam the Earth is here to offer practical, relevant, hard-hitting advice for musicians who are serious about their careers.
Welcome to
When Musicians Roam the Earth.
So the idea of furthering the concept of making a living in music and how different it is now in 2020 than it was when I was kind of coming up in the club and theater and, circuit club business. Obviously, you need a lot more business savvy these days. You need a real business plan. There are people at the IRS that are probably going to light up when I say this, but in 1977, I was in college. It was my first year of really playing music professionally. I was in a community college. All my friends were making $2.30 an hour working at McDonald's. And I was making $50 a night on a Thursday night playing a club. And they'd give me a hamburger and fries. And at the end of the night, they'd pay me $50 in cash. And believe me when I say this, I was in heaven. It was the greatest life ever. It really was fantastic. And I was in college. I mean, my taxes were whatever they were. This is, 40 years ago.
Doing what you love.
Yeah, and I was getting paid for it.
Yeah.
And there was not all this. I wasn't trying to beat the government. I was simply just trying to make a living, and I wasn't concerned with a bunch of this stuff. I mean, the taxes I was paying was so low anyway. I was making $50. What would that be? It was $100 a month. I was working like every other Thursday or something for 6 months. But there was no business plan. I wasn't looking at the rest of my life. I was looking at, here's my friend, working in fast food. He's taking home after 40 hours what I'm making, in 2 nights of work this month. Today, you not only have to have a business plan as to how you're going to move your career forward, if and when you do start to make some money, you have to be able to account for that. Today, you obviously have to spend money just to have a business. Videos and putting stuff online and getting a social media manager, getting a website master, all this kind of stuff. It takes time and energy and a lot of times money, and you have to be able to account for money going in and out of your wallet because it's now your business. You have your own business.
The good news is that the avenues exist today. They might not have existed, in years past where, you'd get an agent or a manager and you'd kind of turn everything over to them. Now you can do a lot of that stuff yourself.
You can do a lot of that stuff yourself.
And you can promote yourself and so forth, but you got to be smart about it. You got to have a plan behind that.
See, that's where I lose ground. When Dave says you have to be smart about it, I'm suddenly, I'm caught in the headlights. But go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, so Bill was referring to a business plan. And business plan is basically, it's your thoughts on how to best run, whether it's a business or your career. You put down what you hope to accomplish, what you're really trying to do, and you try to make it to, base it on a finite number of years where it's, when 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now, this is where I want to be. And then you start to do the research on how do you get there. So, and that's where a lot of the work is. And as you start to, you start to network, you start to go online, you might even do informational interviews with people who are at that level where you're at and find out what are they going through, what kind of costs, expenses, equipment, education, etc., that they had to go through in order to get to where they are today. And then you put that down on a piece on paper. You build the process, the steps to get there, and as you're doing that, you'll be able to start to quantify things. You'll be able to realize, okay, if I want to get into the production business, I want to produce music, I want to record music. What kind of equipment do I need, and what is that going to cost me? If I want to hone my craft as a singer or as a instrumentalist, what do I need in order to do that, and how much is that going to cost? And so you start to put these thoughts down on paper, and then you quantify them in what's called a profit and loss statement, and that's all part of your business plan. And that it's not going to be scientific, but at least it's a snapshot of what your research shows is going to be required to get where you want to be. And you can refer back to that, and it's then becomes your guideline, your outline for how to move forward. And you start to just check off those boxes that, okay, now I've purchased this equipment, now I've hired a website guy, now I've done this other thing, and you start to move forward, and you'll start to see this business plan materialize, where now you're actually moving down that path. So without it, you really don't have a path. You're just kind of wandering, hoping, envisioning, dreaming. But with it, you have more of a clearly defined path that you can then follow, and then hopefully you execute this plan and you get to where you were aiming to get when you first started, envisioning being a musician.
Now, here's the oil and water of all of this, because obviously I don't think anybody would say that you're wrong. Matter of fact, you're absolutely right. And when you use terms like an informational interview, and then you say profit and loss, and these are the kind of things that scare musicians to death. And I'm speaking from a guy who's been doing this for 42 years. The problem with that is not that it's not true, it's just scary. That, to me, that kind of language is me standing on the edge of the diving board going, oh, I'm going to have to jump in now. I climbed up here and I waved everybody, but now I'm staring into the abyss. And one of the other words that you used in your same, your same little piece there was you went from profit and loss to dreaming. And those two, that's doing that, because as a creative, whether you're a writer, a poet, a screenwriter, an actor, a dancer, a sculptor even, you have this vision of, okay, I'm going to take this block of granite and I'm going to make the statue of David. I have this pen and paper and my acoustic guitar and I'm going to write a song. You can't help but say, and then that statue is going to be in the museum for 1 million people to look at. And this song is going to be on the radio. Your dream is running away with you from the minute you put the pen to the piece of paper. I think it's supposed to. I think that's what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be just punch drunk. That's what fuels a creative, right? It's not, the creative doesn't sit down and say, I'm hoping that this song does better in the third quarter. That's not the way creatives think. And that's very sad, because the reality is that the odds are against you. So I think what we're saying here, and the reason Dave and I do this podcast together, this is a little bit of if I may delve into my community college education.
Go right ahead.
This is Plato and Aristotle, walking, one is pointing up here and one is pointing down there, one is pointing to the heavens, and the other guy's going, well, hold on, we're on Earth. There's two sides to this. This is the practical, and I will call myself as the impractical. I think as a creative, you come out of the womb as being completely impractical. I've always said, and I said it, and sometimes people, giggle a little bit, but if you're a shipping clerk and you get a sniffle, you'll probably call in sick. I'm too sick today to go to work. If you're the harmonica player compound skull fracture does not keep you from doing the gig tomorrow night, because it's what you're living and dying on it. You're impractical. You don't care about anything else other than that. And we're looking so far down the road that we don't see the steps. We don't see the profit and loss. We don't see the second quarter versus the third quarter. We don't see the business blossoming. We don't see the business plan. If I were to take kind of a step aside from all the time that I played in clubs, obviously it was restaurants and bars and these kind of things. I would play the hip new club in town. And I'd get there and go, wow, the place is packed. And I'd talk to the owner. I'd say, man, business is great. You guys must be doing great. And he'd say to me, no, we've been open for 6 months. I'm not going to see any profit until year number 2.
Yeah, yeah.
And that makes no sense to me.
No, that's true, because most, if you're trying to launch, a startup business, startup operation, most, unfortunately, don't have the luxury of being profitable from year one. And the hope or the goal is that you become profitable by year 2, 3, or 4. In the first few years, what ends up happening is that you run at a deficit, but that's kind of what's known as deficit spending, or you're investing in the later years, because once you then turn a profit in the later years, you hope to increase that, and you've now done the hard part, and you've made the investments in the early years to what leads you to profitable years downstream. Years ago, not Bill and I, but I used to play with a few friends, and we used to just play at a little coffee place, for fun, on an occasional Friday night, Saturday night. And we developed a slight following, and next thing we know, we got asked to perform at someone's private party, and they were willing to pay us like real money. And then that followed with, can you play at this person's wedding? And I started to think, wow, this is we could actually make some money out of this. We can run a little business. So you might be thinking, well, how do you even start a business plan? What I did back then was I built it from what's called the ground up. And I started to think, okay, if we want to start making money as this little cover band, and not just play in coffee houses on a Friday night, but actually play for corporate events and weddings and private parties and so forth, where there's actually a budget involved with the event, what do I need? Well, first of all, I might need more help. I might need, a bass player, or I might need a drummer instead of just a percussionist. So there's a human resource part of it. Do I need to hire more people? What equipment do I need? Back then we were playing with what we had, and I thought, well, we actually need a real professional mixing board, and we need better monitors and so forth. That was the easy part, was to try and quantify that. I could easily just go on a website and determine how much it was going to cost me to get this equipment. And so I built up from the bottom of my profit and loss statement. I built up what I thought my costs were going to be, in order to get to that point where I thought we could have a real, cover band making real money at these higher paid events. And then once I realized what my costs were going to be, what my out of pocket was going to be, I then had to think, okay, can I afford to pay for all of that? And if so, what type of revenue opportunities do I need to cover that? Do I need, a gig, a highly paid gig once a month in order to meet that? Do I need to average, 3 over 2 months, etc.? And that was the beginning of my business plan.
Right, but see, I think part of the thing that a lot of our listeners and viewers are going to look at is this. For you, the business plan is the easy part. And for a lot of the creative side, which is me, the business plan a lot of the time is the hell on earth. If someone just said to me, you know what, you just grab a wooden stool and your guitar and entertain these people for a couple of hours, that's in my nature. That's in my blood. It's almost like put me up there and keep me away from that damn business plan, because I'm not good at that. And when, again, you use terms, I would have said, I guess I'll rent a rehearsal studio and do auditions. And Dave says, well, that's part of the human resource plan. I mean, I'm not making fun of you. Like, I make fun of you a lot, but this time I was not. The fact that you are able to put that, verbalize that in business terms is, I think, something that needs to happen with more of the younger musicians. I think the older musicians, I did come around to that. I didn't come around to that till 15 years into my career, where I went, wow, I really need to do something more than just either write checks or hand a shoebox full of receipts to to my accountant. I had to be more accountable on everything. I had to realize that, that there's the old joke, only a musician, takes a $2,000 guitar, throws it into a $200 car and does a $50 gig. But you realize you're doing that sometimes. It's only funny to certain people. It's not really funny to other people. Wow, we finally got this $2,000 gig for the band. That's big money. That's more than we've ever made. Great. But it took us 12 rehearsals. Now, that goes into some of the other concepts that I've tried to put together in my Groove program. One of the things we talked about was not only diversified portfolio, but it was putting your whole career on a spreadsheet. And I think that this really plays into this, because as a young musician, you need to look at this. You put it on a spreadsheet and say, how much time am I actually allocating to rehearsals? How much money am I actually spending on gear? Do I really need the newest keyboard? The one I've been using for the last 10 years, it still works when I plug it in. How much time do I need to invest? And the other side of that is, how much longer can I go with this band playing the same songs we've been playing for 8 years? We need to learn something new. I need to invest a couple of $100s in some rehearsals. So as we bring this all, we're going to start wrapping up in a second. The idea of making money in the music business, I'm going to say, without a doubt, is harder now than it was 20 years ago. There's a lot less clubs. There's a lot less venues. It's harder to tour. It's harder to sell records, but it can still be done. I think one of the big items here is you really do need a business plan. Now, Dave gave you some insight, used some words that sound like they came out of a crossword puzzle to me, something about human resources and profit and loss. I have no resources, human or otherwise. Profit and loss, I'm very familiar with. The second half, oh yeah. 50% of that equation I could memorize. So, but here's the deal. When you take this all down to nuts and bolts, this is kind of the serious takeaway that I need you to have. You need some kind of a business plan. You need to be aware of business in the overall, meaning deductions and taxes and expenses and income and how you have to pay people and 1099 forms and all that. Getting your business out there is social media. It's also handing out business cards. It's shaking hands. I'm not going to make any bad coronavirus jokes because we're right in the middle of that. But when I say shaking hands, you got to get out there and meet people, make contact and say, hey, my name's Jimmy and this is what I do for a living. We need to get follow-up phone calls and emails and that kind of stuff. And last, but certainly not least, as a matter of fact, I'm going to say last, but first on your scorecard should be this. If you are considering having a career in music, you need to just hone your talent. You need to play and sing better. You need to write better. There's a great old saying, great songs are not written, they're rewritten. You take the song that you wrote from all the depth of your experience and your heart, and you write that on Monday night, that's great. You better look at it Tuesday morning, and then look at it again on Wednesday afternoon, and fix that little lyric at the end, and, pull this all together. You need to really, really hone your craft and make yourself the best musician, and then put that into the business plan, the marketing plan, and on and on. So on that very positive note, do everything you can do to make this thing work. Get your talent and your business plan together.
Diversify.
Human resource, profit, loss. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. That's Dave. I'm Bill. We're out. We'll see you next time.
Be sure to like us on Facebook, Follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and you can reach us at whenmusiciansroamtheearth@gmail.com.
And you can check out all of our podcasts on billsinkay.com and grooveprogram.com. Thanks for listening to
When musicians roam the earth.